You're listening to Mr. Open Banking, the only podcast dedicated to exploring the open banking movement. Whether you're a financial expert, banking executive, or everyday consumer, open banking affects everyone and will change the way we interact with our money. I'm Eyal and Matheus, your host. This episode is brought to you by Ozone API, unlocking the power of open finance all over the world. Open banking is now being explored in over 100 countries. Most of these initiatives are still in their early days, but quite a few are now several years in on their open banking journeys. The EU moved first. The UK was quick to follow. Australia came in strong. But it was Brazil who seemed to really hit the nail on the head. In the space of a single year, that year being 2021, they went from essentially a plan on paper to one of the most advanced open banking systems in the world, running live. Delivered across 4 phases, Brazil's system now supports broad consent-based data sharing, full integration with a public real-time payment rail, and a comprehensive trust framework to handle accreditation and liability. They have also added open insurance and open investments, cementing their move from open banking to open finance. Today, Brazil's open finance framework supports over 70 million active users and processes over 2.5 billion API calls per week, all based on common shared standards. This is the story of how they got there, what they learned along the way, and where they plan to go next. While many who travel in open banking circles know the legend of Brazil's rapid success, far fewer know what has happened since. New capabilities have forced them to grow, and that growth has forced them to adapt as they strive to maintain their leadership. On this episode, recorded at Fintech Americas in Miami earlier this year, I sit down with someone who has enjoyed a ringside seat for the whole thing. On Mr. Open Banking Live. You're listening to Mr. Open Banking, the only podcast dedicated to exploring the evolution of open banking around the world. I'm your host, Eyal and Matheus, broadcasting live from Miami Beach at the 2025 edition of Fintech Americas. For this session, I am joined by Matheus Rauber, Senior Advisor to the Financial System Regulation Department at the Central Bank of Brazil. Those in the open banking community are all too familiar with the incredible success that Brazilian open banking enjoyed when it launched in 2021. But far fewer know the story of what happened since then. Matheus joined those efforts right in the thick of it, leveraging his vast experience in financial regulation to help Brazil extend its lead in open finance. Let's get started. Matheus, welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
You've actually been working with the Brazilian Central Bank since 2012, well before open banking even began. Take us back to that period during the 2010s. What were you working on back then, and how did the first glimmers of open banking start to appear?
I began working at the Central Bank in 2012. In the beginning, I was working with regulation already, but with conduct regulation. And then after some years, I started working with the regulation of financial innovation. So I started studying crypto, but then I moved to a different team in the regulation area and started to working with fintechs. We regulated the credit fintechs in Brazil, and around the same time, we started looking at what other countries were doing in terms of regulatory sandbox and in terms of open banking. So basically, we were looking at Europe and the United Kingdom, learning from the work that the FCA had been doing with both open banking and regulatory sandbox. So before I joined the open banking team, open finance nowadays, I was working with regulatory sandbox in Brazil. Yeah.
And during your work in the regulatory sandbox, you're looking over your shoulder, and this open banking, open finance team is starting to emerge. In 2021, you ended up moving over there, but before we delve into your personal experience and what you saw when you arrived, why don't you give us a bit of background? What were the 4 phases of open finance which Brazil delivered in 2021?
Okay, great. So the regulation first came out in 2020, but the actual implementation started in 2021. So in the beginning of the year, the institutions, they released what was phase 1, which were public APIs with data on their access channels, on the products and services that they offer to their clients. So in this beginning, we were not talking about the client being able to share his or her data, but the institutions publishing public APIs for external developers, for example, to get information on their products and to create a solution to compare fees and interest rates, or even to be able to allow the client to know where the branches are located. So this type of stuff. So that was phase 1. And then we moved to phase 2, which then we started talking about the client being able to share his or her data. And we began with traditional banking products. So bank statements, balances, credit operations, credit cards. So that was in the beginning what was phase 2. And I'm gonna skip phase 3 to just mention phase 4 because it's also data. So phase 2, it's clients' transaction data and registry data as well. So data on address, emails, like qualifications and financial relationships. But then phase 4 goes beyond traditional banking. That's when we are talking about foreign exchange, investments, and in the future, we are gonna be able to share data of insurance and pension funds. So that's the basic distinction between phase 2 and 4. Both of them deal with transactional data, but then traditional banking products and these other products that goes beyond banking. And that's when we mark the change of the name from open banking to open finance. I skipped phase 3. Phase 3 is about services. So it's about the services that institutions can provide to clients based on the infrastructure of open finance. For now, we have only implemented the payment initiation of Pix. I guess everybody knows Pix. So yeah, we are talking about the payment initiation of Pix with different products related to payment initiation. And we are already discussing the credit portability as a new service that's going to be launched in the end of this year.
So phase 1 is non-customer data, publicly available product information and branch information. Phase 2 is what many would consider open banking proper at the retail banking level. Phase 3 is service initiation, what some would call right, starting with payment initiation, but done in a modular way. And phase 4 was the extension of the data sets into things like investments and insurance. Is that right?
That's right. The only thing that insurance, it's still not really working. We are still waiting because there is another initiative in Brazil, which is called Open Insurance, which is run by another agency. But in the future, we plan to also add insurance to the scope. And in maybe a longer future, to be able to interoperate between open finance and open insurance.
While all this is going on, you transition from the regulatory sandbox team to the open banking, eventually open finance team. Specifically, you join somewhere between phase 2 and phase 3. What do you see when you get there?
Yeah, so I joined the team in 2022. So phase 2 and phase 3 had already been implemented, and we were thinking about phase 4, going beyond traditional banking products. But the thing is, we realized that things weren't working so well. So we decided to stop a little bit, try to correct some of the issues that we had been detecting with the APIs, basically problems with the connectivity between the institutions. So many problems while trying to share your data, while trying to initiate a payment. So we took basically the whole year of 2022 trying to solve these problems. And throughout 2023, we went back to increase the data scope and the payment initiation scope. And it was good that we did that. It was important to stop at that moment to correct these problems. And then we also had to start thinking about monitoring, because we realized that if we kept progressing without being able to monitor how the implementation was going, we would have to stop all the time. Like every 2 years, perhaps we would have to stop to correct the problems. So we spent basically the whole year of 2023 trying to develop the monitoring of the ecosystem, how it would go. So we discussed that in the governance structure. Yeah.
That's fascinating, because many people involved in open banking talk about Brazil as a kind of unqualified success story, that everything was delivered perfectly in the space of 1 year. But from the inside, it sounds like things were not exactly rainbows and sunshine. You talked about outages and developing monitoring tools. Can you tell us about some of the other things that perhaps weren't going quite according to plan when you showed up?
Okay, yeah. So we also had problems, for example, even with user experience. So we realized that institutions, they were delivering different solutions to the clients, some of them with more screens. You had to perhaps click more in some apps than others. So all of these brought some frictions, and we decided to standardize better the UX. We still are evolving in data quality as well. That's another thing that is quite common when we are talking about huge amount of data being shared. So we also still have problems with data quality. This is an ongoing process of trying to increase this data quality. And even the monitoring itself, the core of the monitoring, which is to receive all of the data of the API calls. So we have to have a really robust platform that will collect the data. And it's important to mention that we do not allow the governance structure, the centralized governance structure, to gather data on the clients. So they cannot have this data. So they kind of collect metadata regarding the API calls, but without any data that can be able to know who that client is.
That is, the central bank is not allowed to retrieve information that you would consider PII. Is that right?
Not only the central bank, the governance structure, because it's important to say that the central bank is acting as a regulator of everything. So we participate in all of the deliberations. We do not have a vote, but we follow the discussion. And if necessary, we will intervene and regulate. But we have a governance structure which is run by the market, and they are the ones that discuss everything concerning the development of open finance. We have the participating institutions, we regulate them, and then they formed this governance structure based on the regulation. Like we stated that they had to have this governance structure, and that was following the example of United Kingdom. So they also had done this with having a single governance structure. We realized that this helped a lot, and we decided to follow the same path. So we have the participating institutions. They are there represented in the governance structure, and we regulate them and we follow everything that happens in the governance structure. It's there that they decide on the standards, on the technical specifications of the APIs, and then after they decide that, they will implement themselves. it's a good arrangement because they can influence what we are going to regulate. We are basically doing everything together. Of course, we are always there to make sure that they will keep on track.
I think throughout our conversation, the relationship between the regulator and the market in Brazil is going to be a common thread. In 2022, 2023, you're solving a lot of these challenges, outages, broken consent journeys, terrible data quality. When did you see a kind of turning point, these things turning around, and how did your team make that happen? Was this primarily about governance, or was there something more?
I would say lots of different aspects, but we began to see the use cases. I think it was in end of 2023, and 2024 perhaps was a good year in terms of the institutions developing and bringing use cases and benefits to the population. And that's when we now all of the effort is really paying off. And it was started to be really amazing to be part of this team when we started to see the benefits to the population. And not only to the population, but for the participating institutions themselves. They were able to improve lots of their credit pricing models and bringing more efficiency to their processes. So this was amazing. And from now on, we will keep growing at a faster pace.
You've clearly emphasized the importance of the governance structure, but you also mentioned this change in language. The language of phases gave way to categories, and the focus switched from specific technical goals, i.e. read this data, write that action, to use cases. Why was that change in language so crucial?
At some point, we knew that we had to have use cases. In terms of communication, it's really challenging communicating open finance to the population. So when you have use cases, it gets a lot easier because you can show the population that use case, and you don't even have to tell them that it's based on open finance, for example. They just have to know that it's safe and that there are benefits for them to use those products that were built on top of the infrastructure of open finance. So this was extremely important for us, and that's why we started aiming at developing more and better use cases. This happened a lot in terms of payment initiation. So the market and the discussion that they have on the governance structure, because that's the place where they discuss. That's the place where open finance is being built. We are there, they are there, and it's really important that they have these discussions in the governance structure because everybody's there and everybody's contributing to it. One institution, they mention some use case, the other ones, they can get in and try to develop that. And then we realize, this is important. This is something that the market is lacking. And then we can prioritize that type of development. And that's when things happen.
So the specific categorization and the specific use cases, those were terms that you developed as the central bank in tandem with the market. You sat down and talked to each other. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's this relationship with the market. It's extremely important for all of the evolution of open finance. Because in the beginning, we were learning, the market was also learning, the governance structure was being structured and also naturally learning. So this is a process where everybody is learning continuously. And with 5 years of regulation, 4 years of implementation, we are much better than in the beginning, the first days of open banking back then.
There is no question that one of the truly noteworthy things about Brazilian open banking is this unique relationship. between the regulator and the market. Rather than being at odds with each other, you seem to actually work together. I think many regions wish they had that dynamic. Can you speak to this relationship and what makes it so special?
So this relationship with the market is important. And I said that all of the discussions should be held in the governance structure, but we also discuss with them bilaterally, with the class associations, but also with specific institutions as well, whenever is necessary. So although it's extremely important, it's high demanding on us because they are all trying to talk with us, trying to understand what we are thinking and trying to influence what we are going to do. So at the same time, it's important, but it's challenging as well, trying to balance everybody's interests. But in the end, it's good to have like the regulator conducting this because the market itself cannot reach all of the agreements necessary for the evolution and development of open banking or open finance initiatives, at least in my opinion.
To what extent is culture wrapped up in building this kind of relationship? Is this something that other regions could replicate? Or is this something that you could really only do in Brazil because it has a culture that is conducive to this kind of relationship between the market and the regulator?
I'm not sure. I can tell about Brazil. I'm not sure if it's something of culture or even if like the central bank culture, because we have talked to other regulators and I think we are perhaps one of the most engaged ones in terms of being there and participating in all of the discussions that are being held at the governance structure. But I can see as well the institutions, even though they are competing with each other, they are also cooperating with each other. So this is extremely important and it's really nice to see. They have really formed like an open finance community. And this is not only regarding open finance, but with PIX as well. They have the PIX community, they have the DREX community. So they are really trying to help themselves because in the end they know that this evolution, perhaps it's not going to affect all of them equally, but in the end it's going to be good for the whole financial environment in Brazil.
You mentioned PIX. We couldn't have a proper conversation about Brazilian open banking without talking about PIX, the wildly successful real-time payment scheme that now processes more than 250 million transactions a day, or 6 billion a month. Tell us about PIX. What was your relationship to that program, and how did you see it evolve alongside open finance?
I don't even have to really say anything about PIX. I think the success of the system speaks for itself, but it has a strong connection with open finance because we are really, the teams of the Central Bank of Brazil belonging to both of these projects are working together, trying to, like open finance is being able to leverage on PIX. So we are developing new solutions for PIX. So this has been amazing for both of the teams and for the market itself. They are able to develop new things on top of PIX infrastructure. So this has been really good. And inside the Central Bank of Brazil, I think it's great to have all of these projects being connected and being able to leverage on top of the other. So yeah, this is great.
That connection, that touch point developed as part of phase 3 is the service initiation, the right. Earlier, you mentioned how that's modular. It is intended to be built upon so you could initiate different kinds of services. Can you elaborate on why that was important and how you're looking to leverage that modularity?
Yeah, so this is important. And I think lots of people, when they think about open banking or open finance, they think about data sharing. We go beyond that. We have the services being built on top of that infrastructure. And when they start combining the services that are going to be developed, like payment initiation or credit portability in the near future in Brazil, when they start to be associated with the data sharing, then the institutions can provide really robust and really innovative solutions. So you are in one institution's app or on a digital wallet, and then you can see your balance on the account that you're going to initiate, and then you can, okay, yeah, I have enough money, I can transfer. These are the types of solutions that are combining data and payments. This is amazing. We like to make even a reference to DeFi, because DeFi, they have these blocks where they can start building on top of each other, and we see this modularity exactly like this. Open Finance is creating different functionalities, and the institutions will be able to combine these functionalities and develop new products and services for the population based on that. And we are talking here about functionalities that are standardized, so they will be able to connect with all of the other participating institutions easily. And the UX is also standardized, so this is going to be great for the population to use these products.
Can you elaborate on credit portability? What exactly is that use case?
Sure, yeah. This is already happening in Brazil. Some decades we already have this. So if you have a credit operation with an institution and another institution offer you, for example, a better proposal with like lower interest rates, you can accept that proposal. They will pay back the other institution, the original one, the amount that you still owe them. And then you're going to end your relationship in terms of credit with that institution and start with the other one at lower interest rates, for example. So that's credit portability. This is already working, but we are bringing this to the open finance ecosystem where the institutions are already connecting with each other. So we are developing a specific API that will allow them to do all of this using these standardized APIs and bringing more efficiency to this process. And it's important to mention that even now, before we actually integrating this process, just being able to share data referring to credit operations is already bringing more efficiency to the credit portability outside open finance. Because in the past, sometimes the institutions, the client needed the information, the data belonging to their original credit operation. So sometimes the institutions would make them go to the branch physically to get this information. Now with Open Finance, in under a minute, he can share his data and the other institution already have this information.
This sounds like what some regions describe as a balance transfer, but all based on APIs, on open standards, and can be done programmatically, right?
Yeah.
As part of Phase 4, Brazil moved beyond open banking into open finance. Your standards now cover spheres like open insurance and open investments. How did these extensions come to be, and how are they related to open banking at the retail level? You mentioned, for example, open insurance is something of an island. Can you tell us more about that?
Okay, yeah. So we also have the Open Insurance initiative in Brazil, which started a little bit after open banking back then started, which is run by another agency, another public agency in Brazil, which is SUSEP, which handles private insurance, regulates everything about this. They are dealing with the insurance companies. It's the same thing that we are doing in banking and other areas. With open finance, they are doing it with insurance. So the client will be able to share data on the insurance between the insurance companies. But in Brazil, the financial institutions, they also distribute products of insurance. So in the future, they are going to be able to share, the client will be able to share data on the insurance products that they have, for example, with a financial institution, and they will be able to share that data with other institutions. And in the future, we aim to interoperate between both of the initiatives. So the client of one insurance company will be able to share data with a financial institution. So they are institutions that belong to different ecosystems, but they will be able to interoperate. So that's something for the future. I don't know exactly when this is going to happen, but this is something that we expect to have.
What about open investments? Is that an island as well?
We have been talking to the Brazilian SEC, which is CVM, and we are actually considering not to have a different island for that, especially because with open insurance, we have the insurance companies. They are not regulated by the Central Bank of Brazil. But in terms of investment, the brokers, the financial institutions, like the investment banks, they are also regulated by the Central Bank of Brazil. So we can see an overlap between Central Bank of Brazil and the Brazilian SEC. So maybe we will be able to build everything on top of open finance, having both of the Central Bank of Brazil and the Brazilian SEC working together to standardize and to regulate everything so that the client can have, for example, not only the investment data sharing, which can already happen in Brazil based on open finance, but perhaps being able to leverage on services. If they want to transfer investments from one broker to the other, maybe this is something that we will be able to do.
Again, via that modularity introduced in phase 3, correct?
Exactly.
Very briefly, you talked about some parts of that being aspirational. Where are you today on the open insurance side and on the open investment side? What can you do now versus what you hope to do in the near future?
Yeah. In terms of open insurance, so that's another project, but the clients can already share information on the insurance that they have hired from insurance companies. So they still cannot do this shared data on insurance products that they have contracted with financial institutions. So that's not something that is working right now within open finance. In terms of investments, yes, they can already share data on investments based on open finance.
Earlier, you spoke about the critical nature of the governance structure. If open insurance is an island and open investments has a different regulatory arm, to what degree are they inheriting those governance structures or perhaps those governance lessons in the way that they approach their own spheres?
Open Insurance has released its project, like the SUSEP has launched Open Insurance a little bit after us. So we have been talking to them and we have been sharing the lessons that we've had, the challenges that we've had, the problems that we've had, so that they can learn from our mistakes and also be able to run everything better. But they also have a governance structure of their own. So Open Insurance also has its governance structure, which is extremely important. Each island, like you are saying, has its own governance structure. We aim to interoperate in the future, but with open investment, we are still discussing trying to build on the same island, not being really needed necessary to create another island, because interoperability is always tricky. So it always has lots of challenges involved. But yeah, so I think investment is going to be easier and faster than with insurance.
Today, you have open finance in the form of open investments, open insurance. You've got an effective, highly adopted retail open banking API set, super successful real-time payment rail that's integrated into your open finance structure. But you haven't stopped there. What are some of the other extensions that Brazil is currently exploring? What are JSR and Pix by Contact?
Yeah, so that's actually a new product that was launched like 3 weeks ago, in the end of last month of February of 2025. So basically what we had up until now was the journey with the redirection. So you started the journey, for example, in the payment service provider, payment initiation service provider, and then you had to be redirected to the account holding institution, had to authenticate yourself and confirm the transaction there, then to be redirected again back to the PISP. So you had to do that for each payment. Then we realized that this redirection process brings lots of frictions to the whole journey. And over the last perhaps 2 years, we had been discussing how can we get rid of the redirection process without losing any security in the process. So that led us to the JSR, which is basically Journey with No Redirection, the acronym in Portuguese. And based on that solution, based on that functionality, we were able to build the solution of Pix by contact, because now the digital wallets, the ones that have the PISP license, the ones that can operate as a payment initiation service provider, like the client will be able to add his Pix account to the wallet and then be able to make payments using Pix using that digital wallet. So now the population can go to a local store, and then similar to what you can do with credit or debit cards, you just approximate your mobile to the POS, and then the Pix is done in that case now.
Without having to be redirected to your bank to complete the consent journey.
Exactly. Because the first time when you add your account to the digital wallet, you have to be redirected just once. So once you have done that step, you, like the user, will not be redirected, even though the PISP will send risk signals to the account holding institution so that they can run all of the checks that they do, the anti-fraud mechanisms to make sure that that transaction is valid. But the user doesn't know. He doesn't really have to know that. And for him, the journey is much better, much more convenient.
And because it's the central bank defining these rules, they are, of course, regulated, which means any wallet provider who wants to implement this kind of flow has to follow these regulations. Is that right?
That's right. So we are developing an open environment so that every company that wants to provide this service, they can. And the other companies, for example, the account holding institutions, they have to accept that if they follow everything that was specified.
But crucially, all the wallet providers have to accept it as well. So someone like Google Wallet, for example, is subject to these regulations and cannot develop a proprietary scheme.
Perfect. Yeah, that's it. So you mentioned Google Wallet. They are the ones that accepted to be regulated, and they are the ones that are already providing this service in Brazil. The other wallets, they can also do that, and we hope that they will do.
But they would have to do it your way.
Yes.
So if Apple Pay wanted to support this feature, they would have to follow your scheme.
Exactly. Yeah. No, not our scheme. It's the market scheme, but it's regulated. And we don't want proprietary solutions, because in the end, we know that this is not the better way for the consumer. In the end, they will probably pay higher fees in these proprietary solutions.
I appreciate that correction. I fell prey to the same bias that I think many do. I presumed that because you're the central bank, this was the heavy hand of a regulator. But once again, we come back to this common thread that it is not just you. It is you and the market working together to define these common shared standards. Open banking, open finance done the right way. Beyond the technology features that you're adding, what else are you doing to ensure that Brazilian open banking, open finance continues to succeed and evolve?
I already mentioned a lot the monitoring process, but I think this is extremely relevant. So we are constantly evolving the regulation that we have on monitoring. So we are adding more monitored items there. We have also evolved the governance structure. So until 2024, we were talking about the initial governance structure. And now it's in the process of building, of changing, of transitioning to a more definitive one that is more formal, and one that will bring more professionalization to the governance structure. Because in the beginning, until perhaps 2023, we were basically dependent on the employees from the participating institutions. And at some point we realized, we need to have the governance structure's own staff. They have to be impartial and to have their own technical staff. So they did this, they created a technology directory, and now with the definitive governance structure, 4 other directories will be built, and there is already a CEO running the governance structure. She will run all of the directories, and of course, there is a board, so they are the ones that are making the most important and strategic decisions, but she is conducting the operational work. It's Ana Carla, so she is recent. She actually began formally working this month, so I wish her a lot of success in that whole process. She will be working with 5 directories, at least in this initial phase, and it's still in the process of building those directories and hiring all of the staff, but this will bring much more independence for the governance structure to having their own technical staff, not only in terms of technology, but also in terms of like legal, in terms of UX, in terms of communication, which is something really important for open finance. So yeah, this is going to be great. A great step for open finance was this transitioning from the initial governance structure to the definitive one.
It seems like you spend as much effort refining the governance structure as you do the APIs and the standard itself.
Yeah. Just to show you how important is the governance structure, because everything is happening there. So if the governance structure is well prepared, well equipped, everybody's work is going to be better. And the Central Bank of Brazil will not have to be constantly following everything. Once we have the governance structure more equipped, more prepared, then things will be better and faster. So yeah, I think that's what we are aiming for, to have the whole thing running itself.
Let's close by talking about the benefits that Brazil has realized through open finance. When the whole initiative started, a major goal was helping the underbanked, the unbanked, and creating a more inclusive financial system. Has open finance achieved that goal?
Yeah, so it's important to mention that the unbanked, perhaps they are not a huge part of the Brazilian population. Most of the Brazilians now, somehow they have a relationship with a financial institution or with a payment institution. So it's not really the unbanked, but perhaps the underbanked. The underserved people, the ones that had just a really small connection to the financial system, basically perhaps even using just to receive the salary there and then withdraw everything. So Pix helped a lot in terms of the unbanked and also with the underbanked, because the ones that used to withdraw the money, now they're making payments using Pix. But perhaps to go beyond that, to go to credit, to increase the financial relationship of the consumers, of the population, open finance is going to play, and it's already playing, an important role. Because in Brazil, we have part of the population belonging to what we call the informal economy. And with open finance, the institutions can know better that person. They can assess better the credit risks. Perhaps they don't have a regular source of income, but they can check all of the statements of that person once that person shares it using open finance, and they can know that they have capacity to pay back, for example, a credit operation. And this is important not only for individuals, but for companies as well. Open finance is allowing these people to have access to credit, for example. And once they have access to credit, they can better develop themselves and their companies, and then they can start using the investment sharing as well. And one thing leads to another, and the relationship will deepen, and it will get more complex, which is going to be really good for people. We can see this happening with credit. We are doing surveys with the institutions because since everything that happens is bilateral, we do not have the information in the central bank. The governance structure also doesn't have the information. So we have to get this information with the financial institutions, with the payment institutions, the ones that are actually developing the use cases, the ones that have direct contact with their clients. So we are making surveys with them to know, hey, what are you doing? What type of use cases are you developing? What are the benefits? And they have been telling us that they are using a lot open finance. And you can see this, like just looking at the numbers. We have over 70 million active consents now, and more than 2.5 billion weekly API calls. So that's how much they are using open finance, and they're building the use cases. So in terms of credit, they have told us, and we have aggregated this data, and they, for example, the institutions, the participating institutions, they have lent more than 18 billion reais based on data received from open finance. So this is extremely important. The fintechs are using it. The incumbent banks are also using it. So all the players are using it. In terms of investments, they have investment aggregation tools. The consumer can see his whole investment life. He can check his portfolio. He can get better and more tailored products, not only regarding to investment, but his financial life as a whole. They can better classify the expenditures, for example, and then offer solutions. A really nice use case is connect your accounts with an institution. That institution can see when you have gone, for example, below zero, your balance has gone below zero in one of the institutions. And then before you have to pay an overdraft fee or interest rates, they will notify you. And then you can bring money from another account, or even you can get, if you don't have enough money, you can get a credit operation that is going to have a lower interest rates. So based on that, they have told us that that's just one institution. They told us that their clients have saved more than 12 million reais. So this is extremely important. And we have payment initiation, which are helping with all of these use cases, bringing more efficiency to them. And now with the JSR, with the no redirection journey, now they are able to use the digital wallets to make payments with Pix, which is bringing more convenience to the population, not only in local stores like with Pix by approximation, but also in the e-commerce, for example, using the digital wallet to make payments there. And once it's integrated with the checkout environment of the e-commerce, it adds much more convenience to the users. Those are some of the use cases. There are others that I plan to cover tomorrow when I'm speaking about open finance as well.
So the regulator looks like a hero. The market on the data provider side, the banks are winning. They're lending out more money. They're bringing on more customers. The fintechs are winning by signing on more users. And at the end of the day, consumers get a better financial system, more utility for their money, and the ability to save, grow their wealth, and invest. We are at Fintech Americas, a LATAM-focused conference. Across Latin America, many countries look at Brazil with either envy, a desire to recreate the open finance success that Brazil has enjoyed, or sometimes trepidation. They don't believe it. They don't think that data sharing and creating common standards around their financial ecosystem will really work. What would be your message to those other regions, specifically regulators in those other regions who are trying to recreate Brazil's success?
I think they are following what we are doing, and we have been talking to them actually. So we have been talking to many different regulators in Latin America. They are all really excited about, I'm not going to say repeat what we are doing, but perhaps learn from what we have done, and they will have to adapt to their own reality, because I don't think you can copy exactly what we have done. Each country has its own particularities, but I think it's great. We have been sharing our experience with them, and we are participating in multilateral organizations talking about open finance and sharing the experience that we have with them. And we can already see some of them, they are already in the process of implementation, really considering implementing an open banking or an open finance initiative. And I think it's going to be great. Once perhaps all of the countries have done that, we will be able to interoperate, because that's something that is also being discussed. There is a project run by the BIS, which is discussing the interoperability between open banking and open finance ecosystems. It's going to be great to see all of these ecosystems evolving and being developed at the same time. Yeah, I think it's really important. And my message to them is that it's worth it. In the beginning, it may be really stressful. It's still stressful even now, but once you start to see the use cases, the benefits to the population, you can know that you have done right, and that was the right strategy, was the right project to implement.
Matheus, congratulations to you and the Brazilian Open Finance team on your continued success. And thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It was great.
In the beginning, Brazil dazzled the world. Their ambitious open banking system launched quickly, scaled easily, and for a moment, seemed infallible. But speed is never without its consequences. Outages, poor monitoring, inconsistent user journeys, and patchy data quality all forced Brazil to slow down and make repairs. They did so, methodically, deliberately. But these technical victories alone could not secure success. The true key was governance. Not just rules on paper, but a model that gave every stakeholder a voice. Mandated by the central bank, yet built and run by the market, Brazil's governance structure became the mechanism by which balance could be struck between banks and fintechs, incumbents and challengers, regulators and industry. Without that balance, no amount of APIs would ever be enough. Now, as the system matures, Brazil once again finds itself pressing ahead. Wider datasets continue to be added, myriad services can now easily be initiated, and payment experiences are being streamlined through digital wallets. All on the foundation of common, open standards. Which means that even the largest players, big tech included, must play by the same rules. It is a delicate balance, reconciling the needs of banks, fintechs, regulators, and consumers is no easy task. Yet, when held in place, that balance charts a course towards a financial system that is stronger, more resilient, and more fair for everyone. If you wish to see what that looks like, continue to look to Brazil. Thanks for listening to Mr. Open Banking, the podcast that explores the ongoing evolution of open banking and its impact on our lives. Make no mistake, the rise of open banking is going to change financial services forever, and we will be covering that story every step of the way. This is your host, Eyal and Matheus. Until next time. This episode of Mr. Open Banking was made possible by Ozone API, providers of the only API platform that supports every open banking standard in the world, unlocking the power of open finance. To learn more, visit ozoneapi.com.